Greetings, welcome, come on in. Greetings, divine, all blessed, peace and love, joy and prosperity. Welcome, welcome. And call me now at area code 845-277-9143. Call me right now at 845-277-9143 with your questions, comments, or requests. All is a blessing.
Come back home to Africa. She's calling your name through the wind. Come back home to Africa. The fatted calf and golden ring are waiting for you once again. Coming back. I'm longing for my family. Coming back to you. Out of bondage and now I am free. Da 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 da. Come back home to Africa. She's calling your name through the wind. Come back home to Africa. The fatted calf and golden ring are waiting for you once again. Coming back. I'm longing for my family. Coming back. Out of bondage and now I am free. Da 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 da.
Greetings, welcome, greetings. Come on in, divine, all blessed. Come on in, welcome, welcome. Greetings, salutations. Come on in, welcome. Welcome, come on in. Greetings and salutations. Alafia, Alafia, come on in. Divine, all blessed, welcome, peace and love.
Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Da, 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 da.
Call me now, 845-277-9143. Divine, all blessed, peace and love, joy and prosperity, elevation, manifestation, and revelations. We are now sitting live and always in archive at your leisure and convenience with the Divine Prince, Pan-African Spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye Hoodoo Obeya Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo, world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, reiteration, and it is my ever-living reality. It is crucial to the very foundation of my understanding, my being, my walk, my works along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. And it is how I, the Divine Prince, make sense out of all that we're challenged with here in our daily existence on Mother, Father Earth. And it is my personal place of power and understanding, the place from where I begin, the place from where I realize and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe. All one need do is choose. And so it is. Ashe. Today is Friday, May 1st, May Day 2020. It's May Day somewhere in the world, 2020. And I am emanating and vibrating with you and for you live, virtually, verbally, cosmically, quantum, universally from this working temple of the House of the Divine Prince, Thai Potions and Hoodoo Central in this legendary, beautiful, most historic and enchanted city in America, New Orleans, Louisiana. Historic Treme, New Orleans, Louisiana, the land of my ancestors and those who came before me along this spiritualist hoodoo Obeah life path and journey, passing down the great Obeah stick, along with the knowledge of the life-giving, healing herbs, roots, plants, spirits, rituals, traditions. Please do continue to be with me here at high noon, U.S. Central Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com/the-divine-prince. And of course, you can call me now at area code 845-277-9143. When you're ready with your question, comment, or request, please just press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I will unmute your mic and bring you into the conversation. Of course, you can also enjoy me on many social media platforms, Facebook, my youtube.com/Voodoo Thai, Divine Prince Thai Mecca. I can't get the Instagram thing to work, Kiana, so I'm gonna need some time to get Instagram. I don't know why I got Instagram to work so well the first day, the first time, and I've had nothing but problems trying to reconnect the Instagram ever since. So Instagram is not present, but on 2 platforms in Facebook, of course, YouTube Live, Periscope by way of Twitter, and StreamYard. And if you would like to enjoy the conversation, please do follow the banner link that I will throw up in the chat momentarily, and that should allow you to connect and be a part of the broadcast, the visual and audio broadcast. Blog Talk Radio will allow you to be a part of the audio broadcast at area code 845-277-9143. And do press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. This will unmute your mic and allow me to bring you into the conversation. As always, I start by building on a foundation that should already be present, that should already be stable, that should already be beneath not only me, but those who are indeed under the sound of my voice. And this can be literally or figuratively. Be connected with your ancestors, and everything that we do at every moment in time, space, acknowledge those who came before. And it's deeper than honoring thy mother and thy father, that your days might be long. Honor thy great Mother Earth and thy great Father Sky. Honor thy great body of Nut, and also that great foundational platform of Earth that is Geb, and show due respect and acknowledgement in all things. It's only a foolish individual, it's only a foolish generation that denies all the hard work of the centuries and thousands of years of consciousness that has evolved evolved in this space prior to us coming in, prior to us being a thought in mom and pop's mind, prior to us taking on physical incarnate reality. So it's a given to acknowledge, but it's a blessing to consciously acknowledge those who came before, to be able to call their names, recite their names, to remember their names, but also to invoke their power and their energy. And for those who don't feel you have that connection or you don't have that connection yet, whether it be through a lack of information or by way of adoption or some other means that you feel you lack that information, your ancestral memory still stands up in your blood, still stands up in your DNA, still pushes forward in everything that you think, do, or say. Again, whether you're cognizant or conscious of it or not, whether it's a literal directive or one that's figurative, in that it's at the seed of who and what we are. Light and dark, good and bad. It is that balance, if you will, of X and Y that makes us human, that gives us our human nature. And two, in the spirit realm, that balance of masculine, feminine, that balance of the great God and the great goddess give us our fullness, our wholeness and consciousness. So we do nothing without our ancestors. We get up in the morning and acknowledge our ancestors from the first breath. But we also acknowledge our own head, our own sense of consciousness, our own reawakening, our own return, if you will, from the physical mimicked death state, from the spiritual travel state. Because indeed, when we're asleep, it allows our brains to not only reset and reorganize our literal thoughts and our numerical thoughts and our memories, but also all the feelings and spirit and other intra-dimensional interactions that we make as the divine creations that we are at every moment of our waking existence. So in that same moment that we acknowledge our ancestors, it's only wise, it's only prudent, it's only implied that one would acknowledge self just by the breath, just being conscious of the breath, just being conscious of the waking process. We have an opportunity, many of us right now. Our frontline workers have to do what they have to do. Our essential workers have to be where they need to be at a given time. But many of us now have an opportunity to not necessarily wake up at the sound of the alarm clock, wake up at the sound of, the appointment alert that says that we need to punch, that we need to go somewhere and exert our energy, often outside our living space, outside our existence to some degree. We now have a time to wake up and be conscious in the waking process, be conscious of that transition from dream state, from deeper levels of beta states to that quote unquote waking state when we come into consciousness, when we come into the sunlight again, if you will. And we also in that moment, for indeed, without the garden and crossroad, we can't go or come, we can't enter or exit, we can't begin or end without acknowledging that divine trickster that is often mistaken for a troublemaker, when in reality, I like to refer to him as the one who throws up the mirror, the one who throws up the mirror to where we truly are at any given point in our ego. Not our existence, but our ego. So we acknowledge those powers and those great forces that stand up in the ritual calendar of things within the day. We give knowledge to Ogu and Oshosi and Orisha Oko and indeed all the deities throughout the African transatlantic, Pan-African, trans-African experience that stand up in prosperity and crop production, in the fertility that we expect from not only nature itself, but from our seed plant as it relates to our spiritual endeavors. our mental endeavors, our intellectual endeavors. We indeed don't go to school or send our children to school and not expect that seed planting, that fertilization process to then crop at some future date, whether it's literally in the check or in the paycheck, if you will, or just in our ability to acquire that which we need. This is also the season for us to acknowledge what's already in our hands. Many of you are waiting on something to come. Many of you are waiting on the stimulus check to come. Many of you are waiting, hopefully for resources to come, where you might be in a desperate position right now. But remember to acknowledge that which is already in your hands. It's more than just acknowledging the bird, the bird and the what is it? The two hands in the bird in your hand is better than the two birds in the bush. The bird in hand is better than the two birds in the bush. It's better than that. It's deeper than that. We often overlook our ability to create as divine human creators, to create and recreate a reality that's most shaped in our image, and particularly through artistic pursuits, creative pursuits, literary pursuits, those pursuits that come out of our intellectual property, that come out of our minds, our hearts, and often emanate through our hands and show up in real world success demonstrations. So we acknowledge those powers, those forces, those traditions, if you will, that we would operate in today, this day, within the magical voodoo ritual calendar that many among us are so familiar and so aware with. I want to also acknowledge those who are with me in my live chat. My Blog Talk Radio chat is open. I don't know how long it's going to be open. We often run into some kind of glitch with the Blog Talk Radio chat. But of course, Kiona D. Carter is here with me. She's assisting me in acknowledging the Facebook, the StreamYard, the YouTube Live, everyone who's showing up now, my Periscope viewers and participants. Hola, greetings, Jesus Christ. Welcome for being a part of the show. We love you. Kayla Talk, greetings, beloved. Neophyte Bokur, welcome all for being a part of the show. And please acknowledge always Kiona D. Carter for assisting us in managing the live chat commentary. I'm trying to put the okay, the link is streaming actually. So I had to actually stop it from streaming in order to copy it and paste it and put it into the oh no, I don't. I could have gone in at it from the bottom of the screen. Please forgive me, y'all. Y'all know I haven't even done a half a dozen of these shows completely yet. So I'm still learning how to navigate this new complex StreamYard switchboard and talk and stay on point and acknowledge what's going on in the chat all at the same time. Greetings, Danette Gibbs. Thank you so much for being a godchild and a regular participant of the show. Kiana Metlock, greetings, beloved. Thank you so much. Jennifer Anderson, thank you so much for continuing to be active participants in the show. Also, please be mindful that my phone lines are available at area code 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. Do press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I'll be more than certain to open your mic. I think the shows are better when people participate, when people ask questions, when people bring their energy, if you will, to this powerful platform that we have to reach a diverse audience globally. Many of you have heard me say, I don't say it every day, the reach that we have just through Blog Talk Radio alone. Blog Talk Radio is a global, international platform for radio, podcasts, audio listenership. And it also translates somehow into your iTunes and and some of those other snazzy little apps that allow you to listen to podcasts and radio broadcasts at your leisure. So we are aware that people are also gaining access to the show through that platform as well. But we also know that YouTube is the #1 social media platform right now, if you didn't already know. If you're more active in Instagram, or you're more active in Twitter, or you're more active in Facebook, understand you're missing a great deal of your community by not being present on YouTube. And not only being present, but operating in YouTube, communicating in YouTube, interacting in YouTube. And we think of the Orisha and the Loa that stand up, particularly on this ritual calendar. We keep going back to foundation building, putting down crops, laying down seeds, sowing of seeds, and then the expectation of reaping. Sometimes we reduce that down to karma. And karma is so much more complex than what I do to you comes back to me. Karma also involves what I do to myself, and what I do, how I do and treat nature, how I do and treat spirit, also plays a role into what we, in our Western way of trying to reduce things, think of what karma is. When we think about what prosperity is or wealth is, for some of us, we think of it in the most basic, material, carnal, pentacle sort of orientation. Hitting the lotto, getting that big paycheck, having that massive bank account. And indeed, real world physical manifestation is the reason for spiritual investment. Absolutely, we want to see our beliefs, our quote unquote sense of faith, but more importantly, our sense of activity, which is why I sort of settled into Voodoo in the first place. It gave me a sense of activity, a sense of not being the victim, a sense of not always having to wait on something to happen in order to get what I need, in order to get a response from the creative, but a sense of coactive relationship, interactive relationship that keeps things moving cyclically within seasons. When we look at indigenous cultures, quote unquote, what we used to refer to as native cultures and traditions, we see such a close relationship to not only astronomy and astrology in the sky, but also to nature and the seasons itself, and particularly nature wherever we find our great ancestor. Because nature is always going to be specific to location, just as time is specific to location. So you might have a certain global plant availability, but then you're going to have specific plant availability depending on your location, depending on where you are on the globe, depending on how much drought or how much water or too much water might be in your particular region of the world or any particular place and time. I like to think about that. In fact, I like to study and look into that, particularly when looking at the Middle Passage and what powers, what forces, what deity, what Loa, what Orisha would have been common, would have been active, particularly when we position it in terms of timing. In the time of the Middle Passage, 1400, 15, 16, what was going on where in the world? And May Day gives us an opportunity to look at that, because we know May Day to be this sort of Eurocentric coming of spring holiday, if you will. We know that it's derived from a pagan holiday. We know that it acknowledges the beginning of spring, and that always has some astronomical sky god, sky spiritual understanding connected to it. And particularly when book writers and book authors of European descent start talking about what's quote unquote pagan. Anytime pagan is used, even if you refer to yourself as pagan, anytime pagan is used, it's an immediate reference to the dominant world religions: Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Anything that's not that is quote unquote pagan. in the Western mindset. We're not thinking in terms of spirit, nature, our connection to nature and our connection to the sky. It's seen as not quote unquote religion, but somehow just spirit. And somehow that translates loosely to people as something that's random and doesn't have an order. And indeed, we know that our seasons should have an order. Our weather has a certain order to it that our meteorologists can track and pay attention to. And so we know our ancient cultures who were reliant on food crops and food sustainability and their ability to sustain large groups of people in any particular location or even migratory location. That importance, that awareness of the weather and nature is what stands up today in what we now label as voodoo, Orisha, etc. And so May Day is sort of the return of the sun, return of fertility, if you will, in fertility and fruitility in the northern hemisphere. Understanding that at this time, the rest of the world didn't exist until quote unquote Columbus was sent out to find it, right? He was supposed to fall off the edge of the planet. So when I look at what was going on in Africa, in South America, in Asia, and other parts of the world that matched that time period, that matched that season, things get real interesting, particularly in Africa, for instance, in May. Even today, it's suggested to avoid northern and western desert and coastal regions of Africa unless you really favor heat and humidity. Many of the festivals and events that take place in those regions of the world today are jazz oriented, art oriented, culture oriented events, which play more into not just tourism and tourists who might come and visit Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon between May, June, July, and August, but also reflect to some degree what still remains and what is still active in these regions as it relates to indigenous culture, tradition, and practice. We find in Ifa and in Nigeria and Ifa-oriented land regions, and even Voodoo, the year ends and begins in June. And so this is a time of wetness in some cases and um, um, torrential spring-like weather in some of these regions, flooding in some of these regions, monsoons in some of these regions. The rains are underway in West Africa in June, in particularly. Morocco and other northern African countries start to see the annual influx of summer visitors from Europe around this same time. So with great weather and growing crowds in South Africa, again, we see Lake Turkana Cultural Festival. We see the Festival of World Sacred Music. We see, oh wow, how do you pronounce this? G, N like Nancy, A-O-U-A. Genoa and World Music Festival in South and Southern Africa. This is also a passionate celebration held in another very complicated word to pronounce, Esauria, Essaouira, in late June, with concerts featuring international, national, and local performers and art exhibitions. A great chance to hear some bluesy Genoa developed here by free slaves. I'm not exactly sure it's where Genoa is. So it's sounding like an East African repatriating slave type festival event. But again, it centers around the actions of the West. It doesn't help us look at and determine what festivals, what events, what seasonal changes would have been taking place there by the indigenous people before their systems were interrupted. We know that religion was enforced upon many of these people: Catholicism, Christianity, Protestantism, etc. Area code 305, I see you coming and going, beloved. Did you have a question or a comment? Press the number 1 for me, area code 305. And I'll open your mic if you had a question or comment. But it's difficult to pin down more indigenous celebrations in these regions in terms of seasonal change in nature and what they would have been doing organically before Western seasonal events and holidays were sort of impressed upon them, much like Easter and Christmas and holidays of such, which are now celebrated all worldwide, all around the world, but we know don't necessarily have indigenous origins in many of the locations today where it's celebrated. It's celebrated today where religion is celebrated: Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Area code 305. Welcome, beloved. I'm coming to you right now. I'm opening your mic. Who's calling 305 and where are you calling from?
Greetings, Divine Prince. Okay. This is Nikisha. I called the Blog Talk radio, so I can't hear while I'm out here in the street trying to find some Palo Santo. So y'all just ignore me. I'm just trying to listen to what's going on in the chat.
Okay, well, we certainly appreciate you, beloved. Thank you so much for calling in and being a participant in the show. Now, listen, you don't have to respond, but I got to give my PSA for the day. Unless you're working and it's essential and you have to be out and about, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. Now, listen, this is not quite the most spiritual part of my show. I know for some of you it gets a little political and it gets more into the weather. But any spiritual show has to acknowledge the weather. It's a mistake not to acknowledge the weather. We can sort of pull the blinds down, shutter the doors, if it's a storm, or rain cloud overhead, but we can't deny the weather. We have to operate within the weather. So let's be careful, beloved, not just you, but anybody who's listening right now. Stay home. Stay home. This virus does not like Black people. This virus does not like Black people. That's not racial. That's statistics. Those are the numbers. This virus does not like Black people. And if you haven't noticed, you got all sorts of people coming out now that are saying, stop paying attention to age. Stop thinking that because you're 30 or 20 or a teenager that you aren't susceptible to not only being a carrier to this, but actually getting sick and being affected terribly by this yourself. I don't want to have to get it and survive it. I don't want to have to get it and be, someone, a guinea pig, if you will, for the creation of antibodies, which they're still not scientifically clear about. Come on now, let's be clear. They're still not, Dr. Fauci and them still ain't clear about whether people who even have developed any sort of contact or antibodies are not going to thusly be affected again in the future. And I'm not trying to be a guinea pig. That is my position. You all can go right on out there. We need, I guess, a group of people brave enough, strong enough to go out there and test the waters. Test the waters for me. Test the waters for my mama. Test the waters for some other people of diverse age and diversity of ethnicity that want to be clear that there ain't no sharks in the water, or we at least know how to handle the sharks that might be in the water before we step out there. But one thing that we know that's not a conspiracy is the virus don't like Black people. The virus. I didn't say China, I didn't say the government, I didn't say Trump. I said the virus does not like Black people, and we know that by the numbers. We know that by the numbers. And it's depending on where you are. You know, it's killing more women in some locations. It's killing more men in some locations. You know, and here lately, I guess because we are getting overworked by the constant news about it every day for the last 90 days or more. They are finding the more curious story to discuss. They are finding the lesser known areas of this COVID-19 to sort of bring up to the mirror of media light and attention. And so we are seeing young people now. We hear stories about cats, dogs, lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. Okay. So I, for one, am not anybody's test rat. I'm not anybody's lab rat. I'm not anybody's, you know, well, we need a core of people to sort of go out and test and see what's happening. Because that's what it looked like to me. That's what it looked like to me. You know, even these governments and these municipalities aren't even following their own rules. They're more concerned about getting the economy going, rightly or wrongly, but getting the economy going, which often, you know, what's the bottom line of getting the economy going? The dollar. So depending on how badly or desperately you might need a dollar right now, depending on how badly or desperately you might need your lights paid or your gas on or your rent paid or your mortgage paid, you know, whatever it might be, they are using you as a test subject. Let's keep it real. And so I, for one, I'm not going anywhere. Nothing clears up in 2 weeks. Nothing clears up in 2 weeks. Nothing. 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 Okay. Now we take, you know, I don't want to start calling up brand advertisements, but you know, your Alka-Seltzer Plus or your aspirin, you know, or whatever it might be, you know, and we fight through most often because we have to. You got a family to raise, children to raise, bills to pay, mouths to feed, etc. But we're talking about a calamity, a plague-like proportions. So I welcome those of you who feel it's your American right. I welcome you to test it out for me because I ain't about to do it. I'm not about to do it. Test it out for me, test it out for the next guy or girl, because I'm not about to do it. So I'm acting like the virus is still alive and well, which it is. And until we see, you know, not just a flattening, because understand a flattening means, you know, we got some sense of control of it in that it's not overwhelming the medical industry. You understand that's always been sort of the motivating factor, which still goes back to economy. So don't let those who might be in need or be desperate, rich or poor, cloud your understanding of what's going on right now, of the weather, of what's happening right now. I, for one, I'm not doing it. So you all can go out there, let me know. I invited you on the last show to please post it, put it on your Instagram, your Facebook. I want to see you out there. I want to see you healthy. Some of you I call and hear from on a regular basis because I want to hear. I want to hear the sound of that chest and that congestion. I want to make sure that windpipe is open and clear because some of us are not about to test it. And in the heightened environment of propaganda and misinformation and confusing information and confusing directives, even more reason that the logical, practical, reasonable person is not about to test it. So I invite you to just look at Georgia. I'm not picking at Georgia. You all, meaning Georgia, chose that environment you all exist in right now. You chose your politicians. You all are choosing the narrative. You all even choose whether you're going to follow the narrative or not. Georgia. I just want to see. I got my eyes on you, Atlanta. We just want to see, you know, what's going on. And so that's my 2 cents. That's my soapbox of the day. Okay, on folks who still feel they have to run out to the store, who feel they have to go out into the street. For what? For what? Use your internet, use your device, learn some new sites, learn some new technology, learn some new apps. I didn't know anything about Instacart. I had never heard of Instacart until 10 days ago. Instacart is very useful, and Instacart pulls from more than one real retailer, more than one store, one resource for whatever you might need right now. I'm looking in next door because y'all know I love to hate next door, and man, people are trying to get they beer delivered, and you know, and understand there's a difference between delivery, like Uber delivery, Uber Eats delivery, and then people who can mail things, package things, ship things to you, FedEx to you. And of course, some businesses are now morphing, transforming to accommodate. Not because this is temporary, y'all. This is going to be around for a minute. This might be our actual entryway into the Jetsons. I felt cheated for decades that the Jetsons that I used to watch in the late 60s, 70s, you know, what happened to our Jetson future? The Jetsons, you know, they had flying cars and almost magical like technology and appliances. You know, this could very well be our entryway into that manifestation because now everything is having to evolve. The usage of drones is now evolving like overnight, like overnight. So we must be more than spiritual. We must be more than deep. We must be more than conscious. We must be more than woke. You know, we have to be more than that now. We have to be real, you know, and then apply what we know by way of our actions, our deeds, for ourselves and for those that we love. Thank you so much for your comments. Let me check my chat room out here. Uh, Neophyte Bokur, what are we collectively doing about boosting our immune system? Now, I don't know about collectively. Um, I know individually that's something that I'm always conscious of. As a diabetic, that's something I'm always conscious of. From the first word that this virus also favored people with pre-existing health conditions. And let me be clear about something that one of my cousins brought up yesterday. Just because you're 20, in fact, because you're 20 or 30, and you believe you're healthy, you're fine, you go to the gym, you don't have no pre-existing conditions, the likelihood is that you haven't been to the doctor recently. You probably don't go to the doctor regularly because you feel you don't have to. You haven't had any signs, any symptoms, and any complications. So we hear all the time, at least a dozen times a year, of the high school athlete who falls out, dies, has an aneurysm, has some other kind of undiagnosed pre-existing health condition that no one knew about, particularly if you're 20 or 30, because you think you're healthy. And you might not go to the doctor as much as your mama, or your daddy, or your grandmama, or your granddaddy, or your older siblings, or your relatives who might have a pre-existing condition. So they know they have diabetes, so they might go to the doctor more often than you. But many of you think, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm healthy, I got a little meat on me, I've experienced no health complications. And I would love to say, when the last time you've been to a physician? In a year, last 2 years, last 5 years? When the last time? You know, the average young person don't really think about the doctor until they're got a problem or till right about 30. Right about 30. So you all that's under 35 should be equally concerned, particularly if you're not someone who's conscious enough of your health to get your regular annual, biannual dental, to get your regular biannual, what do they call that when your general overall look at your body and overall state of well-being. You can't just hear, you know, you have to start getting looked at when you're 50, 55 in relation to a particular complication. Now we hear, you know, we don't want lower digestive issues and complications. So if you're 50 now, you need to have certain kind of exams. We hear that, but you people who are younger than 50, younger than 40, younger than 30, who don't necessarily have any issues, women tend to go to the doctor more, particularly if they have children. You know, a woman might go much more than her husband might go, and particularly if her husband is going to work every day and doesn't have any real complications. But if you have a gut, if you have a tire around your waist, brothers, you got hidden health complications. You got 5 pounds of undigested red meat just in your bowel system, brothers. If you got a spare tire around, and maybe you've never been to the emergency room, maybe you've never had a breakdown and someone had to call 911, but you ignore regular health care. And that's why this is a big deal as it relates to this virus, hey, Black people, because too many of us have either legitimate excuses or just excuses about why we don't do better at maintenance of healthcare for ourselves and our families. I have people very close to me who ain't seen a dentist in decades because they say they can't afford it. Yet they work 60 hours a week, but have no health care. You know, and are robbing Peter to pay Paul every 2 weeks or every month, you know, and I know they don't have health care. So for sure they can't afford Whole Foods. For sure they can't afford to go a little bit further to the fruit market, the produce market, you know, which is a little bit more expensive. The vegans and the vegetarians in a room would tell you that it's a little bit more expensive to eat healthy. That's by design. For all my conspiracy theorists, that is by design. Okay, the poorer you are, the closer you are to the inner city, the much more likely you are to be unhealthy. Because unless you have a reliable transportation so you can drive out to the suburbs, drive out to the better, you know, stocked areas, you know, often your best food retailers, your best food warehouses are not going to be in the middle of the city. They're going to be where the taxes are a little bit cheaper, where the rent lease might be a little bit more convenient, where they can build space, you know, to house and warehouse their product. So a person of middle income or higher who live in the urban/suburban area or higher has access to a greater degree of diet, but they also have a greater access to whatever they want to eat. Ice cream, cakes, cookies, junk, you know. And so we see that tire. We see that middle. I know some of y'all don't want to hear this particular. I don't know why. The warriors want me to talk about this. The indigenous ancestors want me to talk about this. So until I get some strong questions going in my chat or on my phone lines, this is what we go. What I'm gonna say, at least for the next 5 or 10 minutes. So we've got to stop separating and segmenting how we view our economics and how we view our health, how we view our love and relationship path, and how we view our career. All of these things are interconnected. The center part being us, being the individual, being the person carrying the responsibility, being the person carrying the sword. Because in the event that we're talking about a family, a group, children, you got to now carry it not just for yourself, but now you got to carry it also for them as well. So that's why I say spirit power lies in its efficacy, in its ability to manifest results. Not just to give us a feel-good feeling in the moment. What is the best way to clean the head? I'll explain that. Give me a moment, beloved. I'm gonna come back to that. I feel like I'm getting my questions out of order. Wow, 105 degrees in Arizona. So that's coming. Yeah, and we're gonna have 90 degrees here shortly. I think Sunday we might reach 90 degrees. So that Arizona heat is coming this way, Justice. Okay, now the difference between Irumole versus Orisha. Okay, Irumole are like the ancients, or like in well, not plain English, but in English, they're primordial forces, primordial powers. So whatever is the oldest, whatever created the creators, whoever created Orisha, we're talking about Irumale, like Orisha, who show up on earth and then sort of manifest in nature. There's no voodoo without nature. There's no Ifa without nature. And so the Orisha show up in nature and with sort of naturalistic interconnectedness. So we see the Irumale as being older than that, predating that, pre-creators to that. There's a name for that in ancient Egyptian, but it escapes me right now. So it's a concept that is not unique to the Yoruba, because we're talking Yoruba right now, and we're being Yoruba specific right now when we say Irumale. But that's the difference. That is the verses, if you will. It's great 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 grandmama and them versus parents versus the Orisha as we sort of know them and compartmentalize them today, and particularly those of us in the West who may have a very limited understanding about what Orisha are, by way of the Orisha romance, by way of popularized books, by way of botanicas and hoodoo. To some degree, you're seeing Orisha now speaking English. You're seeing Orisha now in a whole nother context, not necessarily in the original context. So when we invoke in Irumole versus Orisha, as you worded your question, then we have to predate colonialism. We have to predate enslavement. We have to predate sort of our modernized understanding of first Orisha, and then of course what Irumole might be. But they are the primordial powers, if you will, the primordial forces that would have given birth to Orisha. The best way to clean the hair. Now, just jokes, folks. So are we talking about permed hair or shaved hair? I'm like, well, you said just jokes, folks. So I thought, I thought it was a joke. Okay, well, if you talk about spiritual hair cleansing, beloved, that might be a very different thing. Just jokes, folks. That might be a very different thing. Now, based on how you're asking the question, I'm going to answer it in relation to someone who has no path, has no tradition. And I know that sounds harsh for some of you, but if you weren't born into your family, if you weren't born into your lineage, if you weren't born Yoruba, for example, Ewe, for example, Fan, for example, Akan, then you are, like many of us, trying to discern your path, trying to discern your lineage. So in general speaking, I always would start with some warm, don't scald yourself, some warm basin or tub of water. It's best to, when doing a head cleansing, have someone else do the head cleansing. And that introduces many other protocols into the process. Who touches your head? Why? How much and how often? You know, I started thinking about that even before I came into the traditions. Those of you who got to get your hair did every week. Those of you who go to the barbershop, you know, weekly or bi-weekly, or allowing access to your head in a way that Rastas don't necessarily do, in a way that Orisha practitioners don't necessarily do, in a way that Voodoo practitioners don't necessarily do, in a way that Jews don't necessarily do, and some denominations of Pentecostal and Apostolic that don't believe in women, for instance, cutting their hair, and then their head must be covered under certain religious and or spiritual environments or events or moments in time. So it has a lot to do with where you are in your journey. It has a lot to do with what's already on your head and what you already know and what you already understand. So I would answer that question very differently depending on where a person is in their journey, what their religious or present religious and spiritual path is, and how they're operating within that. And then I would apply certain uh, baths and head washes, in terms of keeping the head clean and clear. Intention is a powerful form of magic. So just the intent of and saying your prayers under running water, saying your mantras while you're in the shower, for instance, or dousing your head with water while you're in the bathtub, for instance, and chanting your mantras and chanting your prayers and asking for clarity and asking for a greater sense of consciousness within itself has power, because intention has power. What we say, what we believe, and then what we're motivated by. But then we could also look at what we're using in the application. I love Dr. Bonner's products. I just do. It's not that I attribute a whole lot of magical whatever to Dr. Bonner. I just like Dr. Bonner as a base product. I like the feel and the response with the peppermint. Not that I can't cut and clip peppermint right out of my own yard. And many of you have seen the pictures in the video. But for people who don't necessarily have a path, aren't necessarily walking in a tradition, haven't necessarily initiated into anything, I would just start with the most basic of head wash mixtures, rosemary, mint, sage is a greatly overlooked product for cleansing and building strength, protection, and endurance. I think that has a lot to do with botanicas and sort of that marketing towards burning of white sage, which is really wiping white sage as a species out on the planet. So please, especially right now while it's available, there are all varieties of sage that are available right now at your Lowe's, your gardening centers, your Home Depot. Grow sage. Sage grows like dandelion. Seriously. It's so easy to grow and to maintain and to harvest sage so that you can have your own sage, not just for cooking, but also for your lotions, your potions, etc. And I know some of you don't use sage in your cooking like my parents and my grandparents used to do, who made their own sausage, for instance. That's one of the things that you would normally put sage in, like your breakfast sausage. You would add sage to that. Maybe if you're making stuffed turkey and you make your own fresh, from scratch stuffing, you might use, some sage. But there are all kind of things that I use in my garden in terms of cooking, in terms of smoothies, in terms of health. So there are all kind of ways to approach cleansing and the cleansing of the head. We could start inwardly. How much water are you drinking? What do you eat for breakfast? Understand, I don't have an appetite in the morning. I'm one of those people guilty of coffee before anything. But if I'm conscious of it, and I'm more conscious of it now at this age than I was in my younger years, your brain needs a certain amount of sugar, fat, proteins, activities to get moving in the morning, to get in motion in the morning. So even our low feelings, our lack of energy, because it's hard to pray, it's hard to be spiritual, it's hard to get into a ritual routine if your body is not right, if you don't feel good when you wake up, if you hate the way you feel, or you hate life when you wake up in the morning. I've been there. I know what that is. Then it's hard to even move in the direction of a clear head, a clean head, open, healthy consciousness. So make sure you're drinking water. Make sure you're at least getting juice or a decent smoothie in the morning if you're not actively eating fruits, vegetables, spinach salad, getting your whole grains in, getting your nuts in. Walnuts are excellent for your brain and your mind and your moods and depression and how you feel. And so you can't even go into the activity of head cleansing, especially if you're doing your own, without a path, without a tradition, without an assistant, and you're just doing your own. You've got to then be willing to be inner motivated, self-motivated, to move that energy around, even for yourself, to move that energy around. And then I suggest, of course, wrapping your head more. You rarely see me without my head wrapped. I don't do this just for camera. My neighbors, my family, my friends, my performing community would tell you this. I don't do this just for camera. This is normal, everyday activity for me. Before and after I had butt long dreadlocks, I've always covered my head for the protection of my own energy, almost like why you're wearing your mask now, but also for the projection and protection of others' energy. Not just because of what people might project at me and I might absorb, what people might attempt to, project at my head, but what I might be projecting outwards from my head, what I might be creating and recreating as a part of my own reality. For indeed, we create and recreate our own reality. That's Quranic, that's biblical, that's Vedic, that's magical. There's no system in the universe that does not teach that. It does not have that documented somewhere in a stone, in a book, within their traditional systems, their traditional inner standing, if you will. So we create and recreate from every breath, not just what comes out of our mouth, because if you're breathing and you're conscious, then you're projecting out energy, either hopes for, desires for, wishes and dreams for, or you're projecting out anticipation for the problem, anticipation for the complexity, anticipation for the roadblock, anticipation for people not to be available, or the things that you need to not be available. And then that becomes a song, that becomes a poem, that becomes a repeated limerick, often with rhyming refrains to it, that then become magical power unto itself, that must recreate that reality. The reality that we accept, that we believe, that we anticipate, is the reality that then comes back to us. So be careful about your projections. And so I wrap, I cover, I know some of you are trying to figure out my color schemes, what's going on with the color schemes, why does he wear what on what day and for what reason, and in time, it'll all make sense to you. It'll all make sense to you. Greetings, everyone that I may not have already recognized. I'm humbled and honored in service. That's why I do this. I don't get rich doing this. I'm not getting famous doing this. I do it for you. I do it for the participants. I do it for the people who are listening. Yeah, Jennifer Aniston, that whole opening the beach thing is just scary. Opening the beach, opening malls. I am shy as an essential worker, but I am shy takes precautions. And even though you're using I am shy, I think I know who you are. At least I recognize your face from somewhere else in social media. I've seen your face. He said he was told that the case numbers are heavily inflated. But that's a story I would love to talk about. I'm shy. I wish you were on screen or on my phone lines. Let me check my phone lines. Area code 305. Of course, your line will always be open. Just if you ever want to say something, just mute yourself, and I'm sorry, unmute yourself, and just politely come on back in. But I invite those who are also on the phone lines who might just be listening, who do have a question, comment, or request, hit me on that number one, area code 845-277-9143, and press that number one so that I can see you and unmute your mic. I'm hearing about heavily inflated numbers, but I don't necessarily buy into it. This is a regular ongoing discussion that I have with my sister Wapani, with my mama, um, with my peer group. I'm not necessarily, and hear my words clearly, I am not necessarily a conspiracy theorist. I would be nowhere near the top of the list of proposed conspiracy theorists. That's just me. I'm very left-brained, which means I'm more practical than I am intuitive when it comes to how I align facts, how I align up what's factual. I'm well studied. I'm well versed in many arenas, um, including social media and how to operate on the internet. I don't think everyone uses the internet the way we do in this circle. I don't think everyone explores the other avenues of information that are also available to us. If the only thing you do is, not you, I'm shy, I'm just speaking in general to everyone. If the only thing you see is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you're not really seeing anything in a global perspective. If all your news comes from ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, you're not seeing anything really. CNN, MSNBC. You're getting information, but you're not seeing it in its totality if you're not looking at BBC, All Africa, other news outlets around the world. Remember, www means World Wide Web. So we have the opportunity to get information and the backstory from other areas. People often ask, well, do you know anybody personally who's died? Do you know anybody personally who's been sick? Absolutely. I said earlier in this, back in March, compared to many cities that my listeners are in right now, New Orleans is a pretty small town. We have a big city mentality, a big city personality. We have a big city tourist attraction, if you will. But this is really a small town, meaning most people know most people in New Orleans. And if they don't know you, they know your family, or their girlfriend might know your family, or their next door neighbor might know your family, if not you personally. 7 degrees of separation, many of you are familiar with that concept, is like 1 in New Orleans, maybe 2. So yeah, people are dying close up. I have a first cousin in Chicago, very young, in her youngest 30s, and it was believed now that she may have contracted and died of the virus in February, back before we sort of had an alarmist attitude about this in many locations. We also have some other essential workers, I'm shy, who participate in the show. Hoodoo occultism is one. He's a trucker. We have another who's a trucker, I believe, in the pipeline of getting our resources and whatnot to us. Greetings, Danielle Jackson. So yeah, I'm open to your comments. Absolutely. I'm open to you all's opinions, and absolutely want you to share that and offer that in this space. I'm just saying, I'm not, until y'all are willing to come on camera with it or get on the phone with it. Um, I'm just telling you, I'm seeing greater numbers in the U.S. than anywhere in the world right now, and we tend to be the most arrogant. We tend to be the most propaganda influenced. We tend to be the most, we can't trust the government. We can't trust white people. We can't trust the pharmaceutical companies. Can you remember Tuskegee? And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm not saying that's not a position to have. I'm just saying it's not an entirely whole or balanced position to have. And I think sometimes that information is used against us. Those positions are used against us. When we look at the presidential election, for instance, and this whole notion, idea of Ukrainian involvement and Russian involvement in our social media platforms to influence our politics, that starts at the grassroots level. Some of you remember back in the Yahoo 360 days, back in the 90s, I talked about COINTEL and the still ever-present footprint of COINTEL, and now how that can show up as a Russian, Ukrainian, foreign-backed act of manipulation in our political system, when the very same thing is and was what COINTEL represented and stood for. So often, particularly in social media, when I see, not yours in particular, but names, Neophyte Bokur Tourist, forgive me, he's also an essential worker. I think he's a trucker as well. I just lost my train of thought just that quick. But the notion of the numbers being inflated or being manipulated is something particularly our community is most susceptible to. I know what I was going to say. So in the case that I see profiles with no face, or a face that has never changed, I mean, in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I had to get on my best friend about that. Girl, put up a new face picture before people start to think you are bi. If there's no activity, if there's no motion, normally, I assume that these profiles are not real. I assume that these identities are not real. Even the people that I love and have developed real good relationships with here in this audience, I'm still trying to figure out your various social media personalities. Your email address might reflect one thing. Your PayPal name and email address might reflect something else. Your YouTube identity might reflect one thing. Your Facebook identity might reflect something else. Is it people's right to do? Absolutely. But as technology takes on a much more relevant and present position in our lives, our identities are now attached to social media. You can now sign in and out of certain platforms just by way of clicking your Facebook icon or your Twitter icon. Understand that that's now a part of your wallet, your virtual wallet. Your ISP address is captured somewhere. It's not necessarily visible, but it's captured somewhere. And so your identity is now being clarified in terms of who does what online. That's how they catch criminals and pedophiles and the like, through their internet activity, because they too can create all kind of faces and names, and platforms and be a dozen or more people. But ultimately, even in technology, you're still only one person. You're still only that one footprint. You're still only that one vibration, even if it only takes the most sophisticated and educated individuals to understand how to navigate and operate within that. I am also boosting my immune system. I know I'm all over the place in terms of my questions. By eating more fruits and vegetables, I am juicing a little bit more. Before there was a panic on the grocery store, that's one of the things that I stocked up on, was supplies for not just eating and fiber, but also for juicing and getting supplies that if I couldn't eat them and consume them like red cabbage and kale and spinach, at least they could be either cooked or juiced in some way. You also boost your immune system by your thoughts, what you think. This is science, not hoodoo. Now we can apply hoodoo to it and elevate it a little bit, but it is science that how you think affects your health. People who tend to be critical, analytical, negative, could very well be harboring and feeding internal imbalance that can show up then in the immune system. So there's many ways to come at how I guard my immune system, as well as boost my immune system right now, neophyte Bokur. And I'm sure you understand there's no one herb, root, plant, uh, elixir, if you will, for maintaining balance. And that's the trick right there is be balanced. We also must remember to exercise and move around and be as active as you normally would, particularly as it relates to those of us who are sort of quarantined or in your house or got kids at home that's got a lot of energy that they want to expend and get out of their system. Yes, Queen Reggae, I do have a PayPal in which I prefer people to utilize for sending offerings and or donations. Give me a second. Okay, it's now a part of the scroll, if you will, at the bottom of the screen. You can always reach me by way of my website at www.houseofthedivineprince.com. You can also email me your private and personal questions, comments, and requests to Divine Prince at houseofthedivineprince.com. And you can PayPal me at paypal.me/The Divine Prince, like one word, The Divine Prince. And I certainly appreciate any offerings, any donations. They're most certainly needed and utilized in the most righteous of ways, and particularly right now, while we're all sort of in this whole pattern. And some of us are prepared for at least another 90 days of this whole pattern. I'm going to let you all run out there and come back and tell me how safe it is. Okay? Because I'm not about to do it. I'm not about to do it. Let me check my phone lines because I spend a lot of time on my YouTube screen. You can call me still at area code 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. When you're ready with your question, comment, or request, press the number 1 on your telephone keypad, and I will be more than happy to open your mic. Greetings, Sterling Miller, beloved. Thank you so much for being faithful and being present with us. We certainly do love you and appreciate your energy and your questions. NPR, National Public Radio, is a very good source of information. Jennifer Anderson, a lot of people don't listen to public radio, in my opinion, the way we once did. I've seen technology grow. I've seen technology go from the transistor radio to the Walkman, to the Walkman with the cassette, to the Walkman with the CD player, you know, to the MP3 player, etc. I've sort of seen that evolution. And so talk radio is still alive, AM is still alive, FM radio is still alive, but it's now accessible by way of technology. It's now accessible by way of the internet. So I listen to National Public Radio, absolutely. I listen to talk radio a great deal. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. Culture news, world news, spiritual and or religious news, I absolutely support and listen to uh, NPR, National Public Radio. Certainly do. Certainly do. Thank you all for your participation. Let me have your questions, your comments, your requests. Who wants a reading? Somebody had a question they needed the spirit to respond to. Yes, most of us, Justice, have multiple identities. Most of us. Even those who think that we are just the most 100 and keep it real as they come. You have more than one identity. You know, if you have to punch a clock, if you have to wear a uniform, a suit, a tie to your place of employment, um, maybe you work like me or Keona or some other people from at home. You still got to look when you're in front of that camera. You still have a look for when you answer your door, and it's contingent on who and what and where we are at any given moment in time space. We all have a public persona. So you are the woman or the man, you know, the individual in line at the store, at the gas station, you know, uh, at the unemployment, you know, locale. You know, we all have our way of seeing ourselves. This is very Freudian, but also the way others see us. It doesn't line up with the way we see ourselves. The way we see ourselves often doesn't line up with what is absolutely true about how we see ourselves. We talked the other day, Justice, about body dysmorphism, which is the idea that, you know, I might think I'm fatter than I look, or I might think I'm skinnier than what I look, you know, and that translates into conditions like anorexia or some of the other stuff that people with obesity might experience psychologically and or emotionally. So let's look at body dysmorphia as it relates to spirit and spirituality and religion. It's indeed some people out there who think themselves gods and goddesses and masters of the universe and can't master their diet, can't master feng shui, and bring some order and organization to that desk or that office space or that second bedroom or that closet. You know, a god is in control of all he surveys. A goddess is in control of all that's in her realm of existence and being. So there are those who have spiritual body dysmorphism, you know, who are more powerful than they believe themselves to be, but are also much less powerful than they might think themselves to be. And certainly when they then want to project that onto others, you know, and their availability to assist others, it becomes problematic. I beg people to look at me. I ask people many times over the last dozen years, over the last 20 years, that I've been available in the public space to look at me, examine my background, read my sister's books, read my mother's books. You know, some of you are still waiting on publications from me, but Rapani's books are already available. And The Little Girl Cries by Wapani Savage. Many of you are familiar with one Wapani, that's my blood sister. This is one of her books, and The Little Girl Cries. But my story's in this book, as told by my blood sister. In my mother's book, A Letter to My Sisters, The Way Out. A Letter to My Sisters, The Way Out by Vancel Savage. Many of you women, under the sound of my voice, could benefit from this book. Under the sound of my voice, and it's available on Amazon. It's available. And so too is Wapani's book. Wapani Savage and the Little Girl Cries by Wapani Savage. So my story is already out there. My story is already being told. And my story is still yet evolving, just as all of our stories are evolving. But I appreciate the opportunity to share my journey with so many people, particularly post Hurricane Katrina. Many of you who've been sharing with me, listening to me, um, sharing with me in social media, in various platforms over the years, you keep me doing what I do. You keep me moving forward in my own journey, on my own ministry. So I'm grateful for this platform and for this forum. I'm much more appreciative when people use it and speak out and share their voice. Yeah, some of them just might not make it back. We're still waiting to see the Easter spike. I don't really pay attention, probably as I should, to holiday dates. But what was the exact Sunday for Easter? That was the 12th. So 14 days would have been last Sunday, the 26th. So all this past week, we should now be seeing the numbers that speak directly to people who may have been exposed to COVID-19 during the Easter Sunday events. And unfortunately, of course, there will be those who will be so sick that they won't survive this weekend and who might die this weekend. And that's just Easter Sunday. Now think of the activity since Easter Sunday. I mean, it's really been exactly, it'll be 2 weeks, well, it'll be 3 weeks this weekend. It'll be 3 weeks Sunday. And the timing moving forward, looking at Georgia, looking at out west, looking at some areas in California where people just are not taking this seriously. Or they do believe what did I do with my glasses? Or they do believe somehow the idea that this is overstated or not being told or documented truthfully. Thank you so much, beloved, for Nicole Tracy, for your comment and being part of the show. We certainly do appreciate you. And I'm open to your comments, requests right now. Kiona, I'm opening up your mic, beloved. Greetings and salutations, Kiona.
Greetings. I feel like I have abandoned y'all today. Please forgive me.
Well, all is a blessing. All is a blessing. Just go ahead and talk once I open your mic. Just if you had a question.
Yes. I didn't have any questions. I was just showing up to
okay.
join in and chat. I'm here, but I'm not here. So I just wanted to take some time out to just stop in. But yeah, nobody's really taking this. Not nobody, but a lot of people aren't taking this serious. A lot of people aren't, and I almost didn't until you had to get on to me, and I've been in the house faithfully.
Yeah, and I want to know: are you just in the house faithfully because of what I said, or have you since then also paid attention to the news and what's being reported, and did any due diligence of your own in terms of the virus, and has that been more of a motivating factor for why you've been in the house?
Both, and more also too because of our governor. He's not opening up the city like other the state as other places are. People had gathered at the beaches, and he closed them back down because of the amount of people that were joining. And other states like Texas and they're just opening gradually, but they're not opening here. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, a hint to the wise is sufficient. This is a population control virus. This virus is taking people out. So do I want to be the fool and run out there and be dead in a week?
That's right.
You know, or do I want to be wise and get somewhere and sit down because the stuff I need to buy, I can order it, or I could politely wait until the dust settles and then buy what I need to buy. And so that's why I decided to sit down, because I could do what I could do everything I need to do. I could do it from the comfort of where I stay.
Yeah, the only downside.
There's no need for me to get up.
Right. The only downside is getting lazy or not remembering to get up and move around and exercise and still be active. But I think you're taking the most appropriate approach and attitude to this as possible. Can you say where you are? What state are you in?
Who, me? In California.
Oh, okay, California. Okay. Yeah, now I had heard that the public officials seem to have at least your area under a greater degree of control than some of what we're seeing in the media. You know, it pains me that...
Yeah, Southern California, they're not playing that at all. I think the sheriff that went to somebody's house, they have posted on social media because it was a gathering, and they're not taking it lightly at all, because there's so many people that are carrying a virus that aren't showing signs and symptoms and aren't infecting other people. And then other people that are being infected, they're actually passing away. They're dying.
Yeah.
You know, and this is not a game. This is not a joke. They send this virus so somebody can have it and they can talk and they can walk away, and this virus can still linger in the air after these people are gone, or the wind could blow it to you. I'm like, what is this?
Oh, so you are.
What is this?
Okay, so you are paying attention, because they've only recently started leaking that information, that they still aren't very clear about its ability to survive in the air. Even Corey Hebert, who's a big guy in medical news here in Louisiana, said that they aren't sure about its ability to be aerosolized. You know, they're not willing to call it airborne quite yet, but you're slowly now hearing that aerosolization word being sort of used and tossed around, and its ability to live in the air, and for how long exactly. So I'm glad to hear somebody other than just me is paying attention, and is paying attention to the details, not just the hype and the hysteria of a thing. Greetings, beloved Keisha Smith. Thank you so much for your active participation and showing up in the show today. My phone lines are open at area code 845-277-9143, 845-277-9143. Do call me with your question, comment, or request. Press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I'll be more than happy to unmute your mic and bring you into the conversation. If you are in the...
That's another thing I don't understand about this virus.
Yes.
The people that are passing away in the hospital, but the people that are self-quarantining, they're the ones that are seeming to make it. And that's another thing that I'm noticing too. So these hospital bills and the insurances are being filed, you know, certain insurance claims are being filed. Well, people are dropping dead. Is this intentional?
I'm not willing to say it's intentional, but I will say that once you introduce medical intervention, once you introduce man into the equation, you open up some room for fallibility. So now I know I have heard about the the aspirators, these machines that they've been so worked up about, and the ventilators, and medical professionals say that once you get on the ventilator, I mean, you're already not putting your body under even more distress. Let me give an even better example. Chest compressions. Do you realize that if someone is indeed having a heart attack, and that should be the only reason that you perform CPR on someone is that they choking or not breathing or really indeed having a heart attack, because the injuries just from those chest compressions, the broken ribs, the amount of times that you code and then they have to bring you back, it's breaking up your body. So by the time you make it to the hospital, by the time you code it once or twice, by the time you had a ventilator, installed in your throat, I don't know how many of you have even bothered to look at or wanted to bother to look at what exactly is a ventilator? How does that work? It's not like you got asthma and you on a breathing treatment. It's deeper than that. They got to put something in your throat. And so anytime you go have a surgery, anytime there's anything invasive, anytime we take a medication, we open ourselves up to greater side effects. We open ourselves up to greater opportunities for things to not go well. And so if you're coding and you're sick enough to make it to the hospital, chances are your other pre-existing conditions may absolutely be playing a role, and while we're seeing a greater death count there. But let's be clear, because I just watched a young girl earlier this morning say, stop thinking it's age, and don't over focus on pre-existing health conditions. This girl got it, had no pre-existing health conditions, in her 20s, liked to die, and now she's living to tell the story. So just whatever side of the theory you're on, whatever side of the conversation you might be, just accept that there's something out there. And you don't want it, and you don't want your family to get it. You don't want to be a carrier of it. It's like the zombie apocalypse, Kiona. Okay. I mean, really, I hear a truck outside.
That's exactly what it feels like. That's exactly what it feels like. And then another thing too is that I'm not trying to speak, and I say this that a lot of the pastors are going to have to stop playing too, because of everything that's coming to pass, everything that's been spoken, it has to show. And what I mean by that, like when they speak about the rapture, as beam us up, Scotty. When people don't see that, that's going to put the pastors in a very dangerous place, because people are going to start running scared, because they're already putting one foot in and looking the other path anyway.
I posted on my Facebook page earlier today. I pay a great deal of attention to not just voodoo, but world spirituality and religion. Whatever the religion is, if it's going to affect me, my people, culture, then it all matters to me. So I saw a post earlier today. I'm trying to pull it up so I can read it verbatim, about sort of the conflict between awareness of COVID in West Africa and then the evangelical Christian, particularly evangelical Christian response to it. And so the article was talking about, here it is, Pentecostals and the spiritual war against COVID virus in Africa. Since the emergence of COVID-19, a number of media commentators and academics have reflected on the spiritualization of the pandemic among responses in different African settings. And I too have been curious and interested in that, how various communities in Africa, culturally, religiously, spiritually, were going to respond, to this new invader. So there's been particular interest in the influence of prominent Pentecostal pastors on public health messaging. Some have expressed concern about the possible consequences of their invocations of spiritual warfare. We've examined how idioms of spiritual warfare
I have a phone call. Hello, there's a call.
Greetings, beloved. I am live on the radio.
All right, guys.
I'll call you back in 30 minutes. So, the article goes on to say we've examined how idioms of spiritual warfare, in fact, my sister Wapani's first book was called Spiritual Warfare, by the way, has been deployed in response to the coronavirus pandemic, and wish to bring a broader perspective to recent debates about these dynamics. We consider examples from Tanzania and Zimbabwe, drawing on our ongoing research in these settings. So many Pentecostal Christians in Africa, as well as other continents, portray the coronavirus as a spiritual force of evil rather than a biomedical disease. Now, in all fairness, I'm guilty of that to some degree. I describe the virus as a jinn, an invader, a spirit power, spirit force of evil, if not evil, at least change and transformation that we can't run from, that we can't hide from, that we can't deny. So I'm sort of in agreement to some degree with not just Pentecostals, but any spiritual or religious group or philosophy that sees this as a spiritual invader, because there are spiritual implications to the question about boosting the immune system, but also how we deal with this virus at the cultural level, how it ultimately shows up in society. So through this lens of spiritual force of evil rather than biomedical disease, the world is presented as a battleground between God and the agents of Satan. And for those who enlist to fight for Jesus, the most effective weapon is prayer, if you are, a Bible-believing Christian. Spiritual warfare provides a framework for examining and responding to both mundane and extraordinary events, from a canceled flight to a global pandemic. But despite their close association with Pentecostals, these militarized idioms may also resonate with other groups. For instance, the prophet. In Zimbabwe, Prophet Emmanuel Makandiwa has been criticized for reassuring his congregants that they will be spared from the virus. This will happen through prayer and the divine protection he mediates. You will not die because the sun is involved in what we are doing, he says, calling it the freedom that no medication can offer. This declaration epitomizes a sense of Pentecostal exceptionalism embodied in the claim that to be in this world, but not of this world. It clearly risks instilling a level of complacency among his followers about the threat of the virus. It amplifies the possibility of non-compliance with government safety measures. Prophet Makindiwa has also been accused of perpetuating conspiracy theories, drawing biblical allusions, that's allusions with an A, Allusions, to the mark of the beast. He has warned followers that this microchip implant scenario that many of you believe is going to happen as a result of this coronavirus is an opportunity to implant the mark of the beast into people. He predicts this will accompany future vaccination campaigns. Again, this desire to get everyone chipped with this mark of the beast. This claim has also been made by pastors everywhere on the African continent, but also people who are not necessarily religious or Christian, even here in the U.S. In Uganda, steps have already been taken to prosecute pastors spreading misinformation. Now, the president, not just our president, but African presidents, our president sort of presents what might appear on the surface to be a sort of spiritual, evangelical position to the virus. Uh, but he uses the guise of, we got this, we can handle this. We're America. We have science, we have medicine, we have this pill, we have that pill. And of course, he is expounding misinformation, things that haven't been tried, things that haven't been tested, things that have not been applied in any real world time. So I would say, Justice, that the virus is both a viral attack, but also a spiritual one. I view any attack as a spirit one, any attack, because we are more spirit than we are physical. We are indeed closer to God than we are closer to clay and dirt, if you will. Efforts to spiritualize the virus have been pursued by some African leaders. For example, Tanzanian President John Pombe Magufuli described COVID-19 as a demon, what was referred to as a shetani. Shetani. Through it, Satan seeks to destroy Tanzanian citizens. Despite the government promoting physical distancing, he declared that churches or mosques would not be closed because that is where God and his true healing are found. True healing, uponyaji wa kweli in Swahili. Invoking the idiom of spiritual warfare, Magufuli explained that COVID-19 cannot survive in the body of Jesus and will be burned away. Commentators have observed that Magufuli is himself a Roman Catholic, albeit with Pentecostal ties. Yet, few have acknowledged his implications that God can also be found in mosques, nor his recommendation that Tanzanians also embrace indigenous medical practices for protection. So he's not only Catholic with Pentecostal ties, but also suggests that God can be found in mosque and that people seek indigenous medicinal means and practices by way of protecting themselves against the virus, and subsequently setting attacks out against the virus in its demonic or jinn-like, shaitani-like form. In a country where Christians don't constitute a clear majority, Magufuli invokes the rhetoric of spiritual warfare to articulate a sense of national religious identity. So when we look at the quote unquote Black conscious community, your Garveyites, your Hebrew Israelites, your Orisha community, to some degree, our behaviors mimic sometimes what's being described in this very African document. These invocations mostly adopt a radical style reminiscent of Pentecostal pastors, but maintain a broad, more inclusive focus on Mungu, or God in Swahili. Tanzanians responded enthusiastically to Mangufuli's call for citizens of every faith to participate in 3 days of national prayer. Many took to social media to circulate photos and videos featuring the Tanzanian flag and words of prayer. I'm just glad they isolated for at least 3 days. I'm just glad that they separated and chose to stay still, at least for a moment. Yet, a growing number of commentators have criticized Magufuli, As with Makandiwa, they argue that his use of spiritual warfare rhetoric generates a dangerous expectation of viral immunity. Some commentators have taken Magufuli's emphasis on prayerful to be emblematic of the government's perceived failure to adequately address the pandemic. The government says the government, says critics, has fallen prey to superstitious thinking. Some draw allusions to the use of water-based medicine in the Maji Maji rebellion against German colonial rule. That's Mahi Mahi rebellion. No, that's still not right. That's the Mau Mau, the Mau Mau rebellion. I don't know why they have Maji Maji in this document, but that's the Mau Mau rebellion against German colonial rule. As others have observed, the act of giving spiritual agency to the virus as a personal demon can also serve to downplay structural failures which have contributed to its spread. It divests responsibility to both COVID-19 as a sentient enemy and citizens. There's a risk, however, that exaggerating the idiosyncrasy of the Tanzanian government's response to COVID-19, and indeed that of Prophet Makandiwa, may perpetuate another myth of exceptionalism, one which echoes colonial depictions of African populations as singularly superstitious and incurably religious. In truth, spiritual warfare idioms have been diversely invoked and unevenly received across the continent. They have they have prompted lively religion and science debates. Moreover, the plausibility of spiritual warfare idioms should not be exclusively attributed to people's religious sensibilities. After all, warfare is the signature trope with which global political figures, health experts, and media commentators have framed COVID-19. I have framed COVID-19 as a warfare, as a spiritual warfare. And like Magufuli, world leaders like the UK's Boris Johnson, France's Emmanuel Macron, and the US Donald Trump have all invoked warfare motifs against a single identifiable enemy. European governments have also been accused of using this framing to shift responsibility onto citizens as combatants, whether for failing to adhere to physical distancing or for their biomedical frailty. Narratives of individuals heroically winning the war against a decidedly personal demon are no less pervasive to some in Europe than to some in Africa. And we could add the US, even this audience, to that community. None of this is intended to take away from the ambivalent and sometimes plainly harmful effects of attempts to spiritualize the pandemic, nor is it to imply that religiously informed strategies of communication and implementation are incompatible with more temporal methods. Religious groups like Pentecostal congregations may indeed constitute an important public health resource when it comes to delivering services and messages, as they can cultivate a sense of hope and mutual care in the face of uncertainty. Rather, we suggest, as anthropologists and scholars of religion, this warfaring rhetoric might stem from a shared discomfort among Americans, Africans, Europeans alike, Asians, Australians, at the perspective of an adversary without discernible self-will or consciousness, an impersonal demon. As literary critic Anders Enberg Peterson articulated it, we declare war on the virus because we want it to be something that it's not. But I add to that we don't necessarily want to declare war on people, places, and things out of ignorance and fear as it relates to how we come at and deal with the virus. Hoodoo occultism is talking about healing his community. And he's also asking, why is Africa Christian anyway? Okay, now you were doing good until you added Jesus not healing anybody, which made it more of a personal opinion, more so than a global or pan-African point of question and criticism. My question is, why are we still Christian? I understand why we were Christian in 13, 14, 15, 16, 1700. I'm not understanding why we are still fueling that system in large numbers today, unless, again, people are gaining something from it. And even our bad behaviors, people who do heroin, crack, overeat, overgamble, are still doing so because even though it might have a negative repercussion, there's something about it on a humanistic level that is fulfilling for them, that is successful for them. We do certain things to placate a fear or to cover up an emotion or to not have to confront life sometimes on life terms. When it's an aspirin, we say that that's legal and that's somehow safe. When it goes into our addictive behaviors and actions, then we say it's something else. Then we look at it from a very different perspective. So some of our religious notions and attitudes, even some of our political notions and attitudes, are yet and still a mask, hoodoo occultism, to cover up our spiritual state at any given time and space. What we really know, what we really believe, what we really understand, and how we feel about our place and position at any given point in time, in any battle, not just the battle of Corona, the battle of meeting the bills, or the battle of balancing your budget, the battle of raising a family, or the battle of building a relationship, and building a friendship or building a relationship. So we can apply that sort of spiritual warfare idiom to many aspects of how we view life. It also speaks to a defensive position and not a proactive position. It speaks to someone who's waiting for things to happen and then
90 seconds.
And then responding to. It speaks to someone who's, the victim and has to fight their way out. It doesn't suggest optimism. It doesn't suggest leadership. It doesn't suggest my number 3, pre-planned, predetermined choices, moves, actions, decisions. It indeed suggests more of the negative to us
60 seconds.
when we use spiritual terminology of battle. It's been 2 hours, you all. I'm about to lose my live Blog Talk Radio feed. It will go into archive until we hang up. And those who remain on the phone lines, and particularly those who already have a mic open, all you have to do is just jump in and unmute your mic, and I'll bring you right back into the conversation. Otherwise, I will be responding to the questions, comments, or requests as they are posted. Thank you, Justice, here live in the chat by whatever platform you're using, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and Kiona will help me to respond to
10 seconds.
my capitalized questions, comments, and requests. Your spiritual warfare is critical in life. But just like the art of war teaches, understanding the enemy, being clear about your enemy, being clear about the battle. Every fight is not necessary. Every disrespect or every comment or every, negative eye shot or affront is not necessary to respond to. And to what degree of response? Even our laws about self-defense are very specific about the environment in which the self-defense claim is made. And so you can only match power with power. You can't pull out a gun just because I spit on you. You can't pull out a gun just because they slap you, for instance. The threat must be equal and must be matched in any real sense of what the art of war and defense is. Some of the things that many of you are expending your energy battling and fighting are not worth it, are not as important as some of the areas in our lives, in our existence that are going unprotected, that are going undefended altogether. And it's most scary when it shows up in real world time. You're struggling to meet the bills every day, but then your child is unprotected. Your son or your daughter is left unprotected. Your most precious possessions, are violated. So there's so many ways that we can address, spiritual warfare and what are the most appropriate ways of going at that. And early on in the show, I can't remember exactly who it was, addressed cleansing the head. And now being clear at the head is more important than ever. Being informed, well informed, receiving the information that is indeed available to us, but then applying it in the most appropriate way to you and yours, to what you have to work with, to where you are at any given time. I heard an economist earlier today talk about paying the bills that are most important, that are most pertinent, that are most necessary, until we sort of move beyond this hump in history, in time. And by all means, communicating. Don't go quiet. Don't go silent. Reach out to your landlord. Reach out to the people that that intersect with your economy throughout the month, and communicate what your reality is. Communicate what's happening, and establish terms that you both can move forward on. Thank you, Keon. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you, beloved. I'm going to move forward because I do have things that I need to accomplish today. I'm so appreciative of your questions, comments, participation on both the Blog Talk Radio lines and also on the social media platforms that intersect here with our StreamYard broadcast. I will be forward Monday at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time, provided the creek don't rise. I'll be here Monday at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time, and I'm always grateful for your love, your support, your actions, your activity, and your appreciation. And to all my godchildren and those who are studying, let's get it done. I think I got an appointment every hour today and moving into tomorrow. So let's get it done. Let's attend these ancestral shrines and altars. Let's get the work done. Let's get the work done. All is a blessing. Until next time, you all is a blessing. Peace and love.
A dash of cayenne to the roof. Gonna put on my green suit. Boil a gumbo, hot and steady. Don't care if it's ready. Gonna breathe at that old cemetery. down on Claiborne where she's buried. Build a fire on the fire when the black cat scratches at you under a full moon that's blue. Chant the magic words will follow. A dash of cayenne to the room. Gonna put on my Greek grease. Black top hat, black suit too. Single rod that moves his feet. I'm gonna get them balls out the graveyard for you. Can't see my eyes like she's do. A dash of cayenne to the roof. Gonna put on my Greek grease. Yeah. Black top hat, black suit too. Same old ride that moves this through. I'm gonna get them balls out the graveyard for you. Can't see my eyes, black shades too. Going free at the old cemetery. Down on Claiborne where she's buried. A dash of cayenne to the roof. Gonna put on my Greek grease. Yeah. Black top hat, black suit too. Same ride that moves this through. I'm gonna get them balls out the graveyard for you. Can't see my eyes like she's do. Gonna pray at that old cemetery. Down on Claiborne where she's buried. A dash of cayenne to the roof. Gonna put on my Greek grease. Congo Square. The Omus Indians prepared this place for us centuries before our arrival. A sacred spot where corn festivals were celebrated. The Omus Indians prepared this place for us centuries before our arrival. Congo Square, a sacred spot where corn festivals were celebrated. And as the colonizers came, our hosts, the homeless Indians, they pushed aside our hosts. The colonizers came and pushed aside our hosts and introduced us in chains. And by the late 1700s, we somehow, recognizing the sacredness of Les Congo, we somehow, and the how of our somehow persuasive methodologies is not clear at this moment. The how is not clear. How our persuasive methodologies work is not clear at this moment, but nevertheless, even as slaves, we crafted and created a space where we could be free to be we. And thusly we countered the sacrilegiousness of the French, giving great homage to our ancestors as well as giving praise and thanks to our red-blooded brothers and sisters. This is an oral libation toast to Congo Square, to Native Americans, to our ancestors who made a circle out of a square and gave us a way to save ourselves from the transformatory ugliness of America, which refuses to recognize the spirituality of life, which refuses to recognize the spirituality of life and celebrates death with crosses and crosses, double and triple crosses, the middle passage, the first cross, Christianity, the double cross, and capitalism, the ultimate triple coup de grace cross of our captivity.